Hello and welcome to Mad About Superheroes, cartoon commentary of the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends episode, The X-Men Adventure. This X-Men-centric episode was written by Michael Reaves, who also wrote the Spider-Friends episode Attack of the Arachnid, which featured a cameo from Matt Murdock Daredevil. Reaves also wrote episodes of He-Man, The Real Ghostbusters, and tons of other great cartoons. In this episode, Reaves introduced a new antagonist, Siberiad, who was a former love interest to Firestar. Prior to this episode, there were a couple of other episodes that also featured the Uncanny X-Men, with slightly different lineups, with the not-so-subtle intention of setting up a spin-off. This episode especially feels like a backdoor pilot. Eventually a pilot was produced, the famous Pride of the X-Men pilot, that was never picked up to a full series. But it did plant the seed for the massively popular 90s X-Men the Animated Series.
Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Starting off here with a great title card. Love all the title cards for the episodes for Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Cool artwork. Great music too. By Johnny Douglas, was the composer for the series. And we got Firestar here, starting off the show great. Love the Firestar character, who was specifically created for the series. I've said it before on previous commentaries of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. She was originally created for the series. They originally wanted to use the Human Torch, but because of rights issues that were tied up, they created a brand new character, and I think the series is all the better for it. Love Firestar. Part of the appeal of the series for me, tuning in every Saturday morning when I was a kid. Cool female characters. It kind of reminds me of like there are other female characters that were created for cartoons, like the Harley Quinn character on Batman the Animated Series, who Michael Reaves also wrote episodes for. And X-23 was X-Men Evolution. She was created on that series and then became a popular character also. And we're in the Danger Room here. This is cool to see the Danger Room. Before there was an X-Men the Animated Series, we got some cool X-Men lore on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. This series had a lot of cool guest stars. The prior series that was just a Spider-Man show, that also came out in '81 and then fizzled away when Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends got massively popular. That series also had some cool guest stars. Never the X-Men. This series had enough special appearances by the X-Men. They had, like I was saying, they had 3 of them, including this one. Now we got a mysterious character showing up here. This might be that new character, the new antagonist I mentioned earlier. Nice. when you look back on old things of like technology and what computers like what they are now, it looks so silly.
I'd like to take a crack at that Danger Room. So that can be arranged, Spider-Man. Well, sure.
We got a challenge thrown down here for Spidey to take on the Danger Room. That's pretty cool. I love the classic look of Cyclops there, they recently used that look on the X-Men X-Men 97 show, which is pretty cool. And the lineups of the X-Men on the guest appearances here on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends would slightly change. They'd use different characters, but for the most part, it was a lot like the giant size X-Men #1. They pulled from those characters with Storm and Colossus and Cyclops. Although the episode of Firestar is Born used Wolverine, and in this they swapped him out for Thunderbird, which they're similar type characters, but at Thunderbird was briefly in X-Men, where he died in like their second mission. And then later on, his brother would take over that costume to honor him. When he first started out, he was kind of a villain and wanted revenge on the X-Men for his brother's death. And he used the costume in the same name, Thunderbird. But then shortly after that, he used his own code name, Warpath. which is pretty cool. And he was in the New Mutants, or which became X-Force. Here's the new character, Siberiad. Cyborg-looking dude. He actually looks very similar to Cyborg from the Teen Titans, with the half, robotic and the other half human. But this is the only thing. He is, like I said, Firestar branched out, and she eventually was incorporated into the Marvel Comics. But Siberiad, for better or worse, was not, to my knowledge. I mean, I don't know everything, but as far as I know, I think his only appearance was in this show. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments.
Siberiad has shut off the power. Not all the power.
And
One doorman who deserves a tip.
so it's been revealed Siberiad has a connection to one of the characters here in the show. Wonder who it'll be. Here it comes. Like I said, I like the Firestar character, so any Firestar centric episode is quite alright with me. Although they would change up her her origin and all that when they introduced her into the Marvel Comics. She still had an X-Men connection, but they switched things up. Like I mentioned with the Thunder, she was actually in her first appearance was in when the new Thunderbird showed up, which was the original Thunderbird's brother. She was in that issue. That was her first appearance. It was I think it was an annual. An X-Men, or no, it wasn't. It was a giant-sized issue though, which was pretty cool. Illustrated by John Romita Jr. and written by Chris Claremont, which is cool. They were part of a team that the White Queen was the leader of, the Hellions. I'm really using my search engine here, my brain, to think back and recall stuff. But this is cool. Little they had a romance back in the day, and there was an accident that I guess he blames Firestar for. The classic, trope of science fiction, comic books, all that kind of stuff, superheroes. Kind of like Doctor Doom and Reed Richards, and lots of classic stories where the villain blames the hero for his disfigurement or whatever. This reminds me of. But it works, If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
The accident that turned Nathan Price into a cyborg.
But they're using Kitty in this, and she's already in the X-Men. And the pilot, Pride of the X-Men, which is a kind of a pun on using her name, but a play with words, is the introduction of her character into the first episode. Well, the only episode, because it never never got picked up to a full series. But it's interesting seeing in the Pride of the X-Men, she's in civilian clothes for most of the episode up till the end, where she's wearing an astronaut suit or a space suit, but no costume in that. So to see this version, the more popular version of her costume, I think, in the 80s was the Shadowcat costume that she wore when she joined. Well, she was a founding member of an X-Men spin-off team called Excalibur that operated in the UK and Britain or whatever. So I like that costume, is what I'm trying to say. This costume's not so great. It's more of when the X-Men first appeared in the 60s, they had the black and yellow uniforms. So they just kind of threw her into that for lack of her having her own, unique costume. It's almost like when you graduate and become a full superhero, you get your own identity costume. But when you first start out, when you're a student, you wear the yellow and black getup, which is kind of cool. That was I mentioned the New Mutants. They all had those uniforms when they first started out too. They're on a countdown. They got 2 hours before the X-Mansion is vaporized, and they got to fight Siberiad. And they're being gassed here. Dreaded gas. Another trope. Dun 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 dun. And I have to mention this, I'm talking over it, but Stan Lee is a much better narrator than I am. You'd probably rather hear his voice, and he's doing his Stan Lee thing now. A lot of the 80s cartoons he would narrate, like the Jason Incredible Hulk cartoon series. He famously narrated those episodes as well. Well, sporadically, like he'd pop in and out. Some episodes he did the narration, and then others, he was absent from. And you felt that absence, man. But they're doing a good job, like setting the characters up and displaying, their powers. Giving us, for anybody that didn't know, like if you're a kid watching this, this might be your first introduction to these characters, to the X-Men. I had a bit of a leg up because I had an older brother that collected comic books, so I would, he'd show me stuff, and I'd look at the pictures over his shoulder while he was reading them. So, and then, eventually, when I got a little older, I started collecting comics as well. And when I was a kid, the X-Men was my favorite comics. Something, there's something very appealing when I was a scrawny kid, I was picked on, and you feel like kind of an outsider, was kind of shy and stuff. So you relate to those characters, about, being misfits and outcasts or whatever. But having the power to, to make a difference, and that's very appealing. It's kind of like the wish fulfillment thing, like a character like He-Man, or like Shazam, a teenager transforming into like a powerful character. That was another reason why the Hulk appealed to me. The Hulk, when I was a little kid, before I got into X-Men, was my favorite superhero. And again, something about that's appealing about a wimp that can transform into this rage monster and fight back,
If you think superheroes like me can fight all your battles for you, think again. Have a voice in your future. And tell them Spider-Man sent you.
Nightcrawler, where did you come from?
And that was also a big deal. The X-Men comics, when I was reading them when I was younger, was they didn't always get along, and they had differences, but they still came together as a team. They still learned to work together as a team. And that was appealing too, to learn that that you don't always get along with people. You know what I mean? And you have to have some kind of established tolerance and learn how to navigate in the world with different people. So it was cool to see them. Although this is for lack of a better way to put it, like a dumbed down or a watered down version of the X-Men. The 90s animated series did a good job of incorporating all those things, the bigotry and tolerance and all that stuff into that show. We weren't quite there. 80s cartoons didn't get that deep. Going into the late 80s, early 90s is when cartoons started to try to mature a little bit, to treat kids like they're not dummies. They can get this stuff. You know what I mean? They could learn from this. And it's put inside the package of action and adventure and explosions and superpowers and so, and it's fun. But if you're looking for something deeper, it's there. It's like the same thing. Like I could read an X-Men comic, and like I was saying, I get all those things that I was talking about, and then somebody else can read it and just see superheroes and superpowers and not really, because they're not looking for anything deeper. But this is cool too. They kind of touch on, like in the comics at the time, Colossus, Peter Rasputin, and Kitty Pryde. They kind of formed a relationship, and then they formed a relationship. Or boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever. So they kind of touch on that in this a little bit, where Kitty kind of speaks highly of him and whatever. And again, if you're not looking for it, you don't find it. But because like I said, I had a leg up where I knew these things. Like I said, I do like this version of Cyclops' costume, but my favorite version is that 90s version with kind of like the chest bandolier and where his hair is sticking out of the top of the costume, which I guess they're going to feature in the upcoming soon to be released Avengers Doomsday. They showed it in the teaser trailer. But again, it's kind of like the Wolverine thing. It took them like almost 30 years something to finally do this. They made fun of it in the original X-Men movie in 2000. Where they're wearing the black uniforms and they make the little joke about, what do you expect, yellow spandex? Back then they were embarrassed by it, and now it's like they're desperate. So that they'll do it now, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the Deadpool and Wolverine thing, where they finally put Wolverine in the proper costume or an approximation of that costume, and again, it took them so long to do it. But like I said, they're doing it now because it's kind of like a gimmick, to try to get people back into those movies and back into theater seats and whatever, and make money off of it. But I loved that. Was always a disappointment to me when I didn't get those classic costumes in those movies, especially with the X-Men, because I was a huge fan of that. Not that I didn't like the movies. I did enjoy the movies when they came out. I was happy that we got, after so long, we finally were getting an X-Men movie. But I like the costumes, but I would have preferred them to have been in more traditional versions of their costumes,
I've still got as many Siberian sensors as I can, but there is no way to hide the elevator's movement from him. Be on complete alert.
I still don't know how I
So Spider-Man and the X-Men are fighting against Hyperion. He's kind of taken over the X-Mansion and the Danger Room and all the security systems and all that, and he's using them against the Spider-Friends and the X-Men. That was a good joke. But I always liked Dan Gilvezan voicing Peter Parker Spider-Man here. He was famously went on to voice Bumblebee on the Transformers cartoon series, the 80s cartoon, G1 Transformers, which is always cool. I didn't, when I was a kid, I didn't recognize, or I recognized his voice on Transformers as that's the voice of Spider-Man, but I didn't know his name. And another Transformers connection is Frank Welker, who's voicing Iceman. It was Megatron on Transformers, and tons of other voices on cartoon shows, including Darkseid on the long-running Super Friends cartoon series, which at this point, by the 80s, it was Legendary Superpowers, and then the last season was Galactic Guardians Superpowers Team, or Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians. They should have just called that show Justice League. But this show being where it's Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, but within the show they call themselves the Spider Friends, which is kind of like I don't know if it was a inside gag or joke, or Super Friends, Spider Friends, kind of thing. A reference to, or inspired by, or however you want to put it, influenced by. But I like this whole, this isn't really the real Nightcrawler, but the little banter between him and Thunderbird, where they're goofing on each other, is very reminiscent of the X-Men comics, where like Wolverine would call Thunderbird Redskin, and and then all these fucked up, like almost racist names for each other. But of course, like I said, they learn to work as a team. They learn to love each other, respect each other, become great friends, And then they call Nightcrawler, they call them Misfit. But they were terms of endearment. And what was it? Cyclops was one eye. But it teaches the whole sticks and stones thing, Will break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
And I thought the Starship test in the Danger Room was bad. Failed that one. But I'll pass this one.
But Angelica Jones Firestar, she's another redheaded character. How many superheroes or female characters in the Marvel Universe are redheads? Do that. Let me know in the comments. It's like Jean Grey, Mary Jane, Firestar. There's so many redheads. And also the love interest is always a redhead. There's also the Jean Grey's clone, Madeline Pryor. She's another redhead.
I managed to escape from the plasma bubble that
Yeah, fiery redheads.
made prisoner of me.
We have to reach him. There are only a few minutes left before the meltdown.
I know.
Love that
This way.
classic Storm uniform too. Although, like in the 80s, I love they gave her like a punk rock look where she had like a mohawk and shit, which was cool, to change it, to give her that, much of a drastic change was kind of cool. But I, as much as I like the Thunderbird character, I think that they threw him in here because Wolverine is kind of, especially for an 80s Saturday morning cartoon, is kind of problematic, where he's more of a violent character. The claws thing, with the stabbing weapons. So I think that's why they went Thunderbird. Like I said, is they're pretty much, they have the same type of personality. Although Wolverine, of course, is more developed because he, got, like I said, Thunderbird died early on, or this version of Thunderbird that they're using died early on. But I think that's why they probably swapped out Wolverine for Thunderbird, because at this point too, Wolverine was a rising star. He was, really gaining traction, popularity, and by the mid '80s, he was as popular as Spider-Man or the Incredible Hulk, which Spider-Man was the face of Marvel Comics. But Wolverine was getting there, like just as popular, like just as in the comics community. It wasn't until I think the X-Men animated series and then the X-Men movies where everybody knows Wolverine, especially with Hugh Jackman in that role, really propelled that character into superstardom, like Robert Downey Jr. with Iron Man. In the comics community, Iron Man was a popular character and known as one of the most powerful characters, but to the to a general audience, not so much. Always loved the Professor X. He's got the hands on his temples and it's like a way of visually displaying he's using his powers. Cyclops does a similar thing where he touches his visor. I like I've been talking over mostly about other things than what's actually going on in the episode, but I'm trying to make the commentary interesting. But what was I gonna say about the Siberia character? He has like a struggle, he's going back and forth between, there's like a good side and a bad side, almost like the angel and devil on your shoulder, where it's Willem Dafoe in the original Spider-Man movie, where he's got a conflict between his good and bad side, and he's arguing with himself. It's that they're kind of doing a similar thing here, where he's fighting with him. The good side is fighting to get out because he still has feelings for Firestar.
Do it. Become a human again, not a machine.
The meltdown will take care of your friends.
But that's kind of interesting.
Nathan, you can't.
Although I think the episode has a little bit of trouble balancing all the characters. Like I said, they try to give everybody a moment to display their powers. They show Kitty phasing through walls. They show Colossus as his body can turn into organic steel and he's super strong. Cyclops using his visor, his energy blast from his eyes. So they do something to show off each character, but there's just too many characters, for them to go back and forth and give any kind of depth of character. And of course, this is a Firestar centric episode, and she's one of the main characters of the show, so she's got to be the one to to save the day or whatever. But that's the end of the episode. So that I guess this is the end of the commentary. I feel like I could have went on about X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff for another half hour. But thanks for tuning in, and as always, thanks so much for letting your geek flags fly with Mad About Superheroes. Hey, true believers, we're going full MCU. Marvel Cartoon Universe with a mid-credit scene. Earlier in the episode, Professor X probes our heroes' minds to find out which one of them is connected to Cyberiad. He assures Spidey that he won't use his telepathy to figure out his secret identity. Nice of him, But he already knows that Angelica Jones is Firestar and Bobby Drake is Iceman because they're his former students. Angelica and Bobby live with Peter Parker. They go to the same college together, and they're inseparable. Professor X shouldn't need his telepathy to figure out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Duh.